Hello everybody. So today it's an honor to have Professor Albert Ali Salah with us. He heads the Lab of Social and Affective Computing at Department of Information and Computing Sciences, Utrecht University. So Professor Salah's research interests are natural and computer vision, pattern recognition, affective computing. So thank you, Professor Salah, for accepting our invitation, and we welcome you for this CDNM Tech Talk series.
Thank you very much. It's an honor.
Yeah, so to begin with, we would like to ask you what exactly is social and affective computing and what inspired you to pursue a career in this particular field?
So I did my PhD in 2007 and I was working on face analysis. At the time, biometrics community was looking into this problem, and it's still an active area of research, but getting computers to look at humans, understanding human behavior, kind of became more and more important as more tools became available for that purpose. And we look at, cameras are of course one type of sensor to look and analyze human behavior, but you have other sensors. You can use the voice analysis, you can use the physical sensors, physiological sensors worn on the body. And our mobile phones, of course, now contain a lot of sensors that record data from us. And they give good cues about what kind of behavior we have. And when you analyze this at different levels, at different scales, then you can do a lot of applications that you can understand a lot of things about the humans. So social computing is at one end of the spectrum where we look at maybe thousands or millions of people. We analyze the digital breadcrumbs they leave behind as they move about. We work in this area with mobile phone companies to understand the mobile phone traces, the mobility of people, let's say, over a country. And the affective computing is maybe on the other side of the spectrum, where we look at one person or a few people interacting, and we try to understand their emotional states, their affects, their mood, and how the interaction is happening. And we get insights about this kind of situations.
Great. So moving on to the next question, we would also like to know, besides social and affecting computing, what are the other projects that you have in your lab, and what are the challenges that you are working upon?
So our lab in Utrecht University is a small group of about 10 people, half of them PhD students, half of them faculty members. We work on computer vision, we work on computational paralinguistics, so analysis of voice and acoustic sounds, and as well as facial expressions. So all the kinds of signals that you emit, bodily signals, and we typically use them for scenarios related to health, mental health care, for example. We look at depression, bipolar disorder, cerebral palsy, these kind of scenarios in which we can build technology to help patients or doctors or caretakers for these mental health care issues. We also do some analysis at a computational social science level. We collaborate with mobile phone companies where we analyze data from millions of people, especially in the area of migration and refugees. I come from Turkey, so I'm in the Netherlands since 4 years at Utrecht University. Before I was in Istanbul at Boğaziçi University. And at the time, in 2015-16, Turkey received a lot of refugees. So we started working on this problem. How can we improve the lives of the refugees? They have a lot of different issues, a lot of different problems: unemployment, social integration, healthcare, education. How can we help them access the resources? How can we help the government to make informed policies to help the refugees? And for that, you need to have good data, because without data, as Kofi Annan said once, you're flying blind. You want to do good policies, but you don't know where people are, what they're doing, what their problems are. Either you have to send probes on the field, talking to these people, trying to understand their side of view, or you have to establish some data pipelines where you continuously monitor them and understand the problems better. At the moment, we also collaborate with other countries. For example, we collaborate with the National Statistics Institute Office of Mongolia, because in Mongolia there are a lot of people are nomadic. They roam around the country, and the Statistics Institute wants to get a better understanding of where these people are, how they migrate internally, so that resources can be provided for them to have a better living conditions, by education and employment and things like that. So can we make collaborations with mobile phone companies who have insights about the mobility of people and the statistics institutes who needs this information for better policy making? And then, of course, one part of our work concerns ethical and privacy-aware processing of this information, because it is sensitive and it can be misused if it's not handled properly. So we work on methods and approaches to ethically process this data. How do we establish oversight mechanisms? How do we establish ethical committees, guidelines, and technology like federated learning or privacy-aware differential learning approaches to communicate the data in a safe and secure way, or sometimes keep the data somewhere safe and just send the algorithms to the data instead of getting the data out and getting just the insights out to the people who really need them.
Okay, great. So I want to catch the sentence that you was just talking about regarding this refugee, that when they are going from one country to other, or even for asylum cases or for skilled workers who basically travel to different country for job opportunities, so that causes migration. And I believe you are one of the researchers for this Hummingbird project, which is a collaborative project across 16 research groups across 10 countries. So can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yes. So the Hummingbird project is a European project for understanding migration with big data sources. There are some data gaps in our knowledge about, quantitative knowledge about migration. And migration has many different types. You have the skilled migration, where educated people leave a country for better living conditions in another country. You have refugees who are forced, for example, it's forced migration. You have also internal migration, agricultural migration, where people migrate to a place for a temporary time to work, for example, in the harvest. So there are different conditions which force or prompt people to migrate. And if you have a lot of resources at your disposal, you can send researchers on the field, you can talk to these people who are migrating, you can try to understand the factors. But so the big census studies conducted by governments, they help you understand what are the conditions. But a census study is expensive to conduct, and typically countries do it once every 5 years, once every 10 years. So, in some countries it is very rarely done because there is not enough resource to conduct it. So big data sources like social media, mobile phone data, satellite imaging data, they can give you some additional quantification of the conditions in which to analyze migration. For example, if you're looking at weather conditions like drought-related migration, then satellite imaging can tell you what is happening in a certain area of the country and whether people are going to be forced out because of the poor living conditions in that area. Some of the things, of course, you cannot do much with satellite data if you're looking at skilled migration. There you might use a social network like LinkedIn to get insights into skilled migration. So the Hummingbird project is basically about how can we look at this big data to address these data gaps in the official data sources. Some of it also comes from definitions, right? For example, one country defines a migrant or a refugee in a slightly different way than another country, or they count them in a different way. So when do you call a person a migrant? After 3 months in a country, after 6 months? Depending on that, the numbers will change, the statistics will change. So combining these data sources will become also more and more difficult. We came to this Hummingbird project because between 2016 and 19, I coordinated another project called Data for Refugees, where we collaborated with a big telecommunications company in Turkey, Türk Telekom, to make data from 1 million customers collected over an entire year available to researchers. So that was a data challenge. That means you make the data available and you ask the research groups to help, to come up with projects that can improve the lives of the refugees on safety, unemployment, education, healthcare, and social integration, for example. At that time, there were over 3 million Syrian refugees in Turkey. Now it's even more. And now, for example, we have another million Afghan refugees. This is a big problem. Managing the resources for them is also a big problem. For example, the government was establishing mobile health centers to take care of their health needs. But if you don't know where they are, then it's very difficult. And people register somewhere, but then they start going around the country and looking for work. So they don't stay in the same way. Even if you know their registered locations, they may be all over the country looking for work. They may not have official data to understand what's going on in real time. So these kind of insights we were able to get from mobile phone data and then produce insights for the government, for the policymakers, as well as for the IGOs and NGOs like UNICEF, UNHCR, IOM, which were all supporters of that project, to work in the field to help the Syrians with their living conditions and with their tasks. So Hummingbird is a kind of like a continuation where we again analyze mobile data from a few million customers of a large telecommunication company, Turkcell in Turkey. And one of the challenges is we want to do it in such a way that no individual can be identified in the data that we're processing. And that's a very important issue because you don't want to jeopardize the privacy of any of these people. These are already vulnerable populations. You have to be very careful that you don't have any possibility of tracking individuals or privacy breaches. So we use principles like privacy by design and default, so that whenever the aggregated and anonymized data set leaves the telco, it's already impossible to identify individuals in it. So we ensure that the data is properly aggregated and anonymized. And we work towards the technology to do that also.
Great. This is a really ambitious project with big challenges, but it will, I'm sure, help the government figure out a lot of problems that are happening because of migrations. So, and again, following up the mobile data usage. So you had a recent publication where mobile uses of mobile data for COVID-19 pandemic, you highlighted the importance of mobile data. So can you elaborate a bit on that particular study also?
Sure. So this publication came out as a collaboration between a lot of different research groups which were working with mobile phones, mobile applications, mobile phone companies to help the governments do good policy, implement good policies and good technological solutions for controlling an epidemic like COVID. COVID is not the last epidemic that we will face, right? I mean, we know that in the future there will be new epidemics where it will take some time for us to develop a proper response like a vaccine or a medicine. And mobile phone technologies give us a lot of power in controlling the spread of an epidemic. First of all, the information flow is very rapid over mobile phones. And then you can also implement quarantine and social distancing technologies through the mobile phones. But the problem is, when you want to roll out a technology like this, there are a lot of safeguards you need to do. You have to look at the legal side of things. You have to develop the applications. So it makes perfect sense to develop this technology beforehand, to clear out all the legal issues associated with it, so that when the pandemic hits, you can immediately start using the technology. You say, okay, from tomorrow onwards, everybody's going to activate this application that the government is maintaining, and then we will be controlling the pandemic so that we don't get spread. Maybe the access to public resources will be controlled in a way. And we will do this in a privacy-aware way, because those kind of applications generate a lot of data. The government, if you don't do this properly, will know exactly where you are at all times if you allow access to the raw data. And that might have undesirable consequences, right? If you have an oppressive government, for example, having them access this data is a kind of like a George Orwell kind of situation. You know, the big brother is in that case watching you. But we do have the technology to make it so that a lot of information is stored locally on your phone and not accessed by third parties. But you still have policy-related information traveling between your phone and the government. So for example, if the government says, this location is infected, then and your phone knows about it, and it can inform you not to go there, or if you have been there, it can tell you, you have to quarantine yourself. And then the government does not have to know that you've been there. It's just a proper way of allocating information on a need basis. So this paper was basically advocating what needs to be done in terms of technology and policy and on legal side to be prepared for the next pandemic. How can we use the mobile phone infrastructure to be prepared for the next pandemic?
Great, thank you. That was a very good insight about the paper. So last but not the least, so we wanted to ask, we are heading toward a future driven by AI, so artificial intelligence, and we are combining them with emotional intelligence, which make it pave way for effective systems. So the idea is to deploy them in defense sector, in education, healthcare sector. So, and there are a lot of people who aspire in this particular, to pursue a career in this particular research field. So how would you like to, guide them or tell them what all requirements, how should they prepare themselves for a career, what to look out for? Just if you can.
Yeah, so this area of research, as you said, is booming because now we have technologies, powerful computers, GPUs, and that allow us to do real-time analysis. And 15 years ago, that was much more difficult. And computer vision has benefited a lot from this kind of processing. Deep learning is enabled by these powerful computers, and that gives you a lot of application areas that now you can build things that are working out there in the field. But that also brings with it a certain responsibility, right? Just the fact that we are able to analyze some of the things that we were not able to analyze before doesn't mean that the applications we're building on these things will be useful or ethical for sure. For example, affective technology, this emotion sensing technology, it is possible to use it for detecting cues of deception, right? Or nervousness, or the kind of things that you may want to use in understanding what is the status of a person during a real-time interaction. Now, you can use this for some purposes that are very clear. For example, you can use it in a social robot that is going to interact with an autistic kid, and then the robot can detect the emotional state of the child, and if the behavior needs to be stopped immediately because the child is getting uncomfortable or is afraid or is panicking, then you can use this to create a system which will immediately stop, and then that is going to be a more interactive, more successful system. But there are other applications. For example, in Europe, in the borders, sometimes now they're trying to unroll systems which look at asylum seekers and try to determine whether that person is lying or not. That's, I think, for example, a very good example of improper usage of artificial intelligence, because our systems are not that good yet. And even if they are good, a cost of a mistake is a very high cost. This is like human lives that we're talking about. So the implications can be very severe, and you want human responsibility in those situations. You don't want an AI system to decide the fate of people, because you don't know how the errors may look like, and how good the system will work, as we call it, in the wild, like in real life conditions. You develop sometimes these technologies in the lab conditions, with decent sensors, nice illumination, but out there in the field, the conditions, the acquisition conditions may be poor, and these systems may not work. And there can be also biases. You train a face analysis system with Caucasian faces, then you bring it into an Asian country, and because the facial morphology is different, the system doesn't work anymore. There are also cultural display rules. The way a Turkish person expresses their facial effect can be different than, for example, an Indian person. So if I train my system in a Turkish context, it may not work here. So the systems are improving all the time, but we have to be very careful about the implications of using these systems in real life and in the society. Sometimes this is very difficult for a computer scientist who has not received education in the humanities and in the social science aspects, in ethics, for example. I mean, imagine Twitter, for example, the social media channel, and imagine an engineer looking at a recommender system for Twitters. So what he or she will be optimizing is which tweet you're going to like, right? So they will try to bring into the fore the kind of content that you will like to see. But they might not understand immediately that this will create a lot of social chasm, like echo chambers. People will be hearing only ideas that are already close to their existing ideas. So you will stop listening to other people, like different worldviews. And that will basically deepen the separation and deepen the chasm in the society. And it's an effect that will take years to fix also, once these technologies become very popular and used by millions and millions of people. So my guess is that when we're developing AI technology, when we're educating our students, we have to make sure that we give them enough understanding of the social and ethical implications of technology. We provide them with education towards that. And for example, in Europe, after the Second World War, especially after the atomic bomb, the education system integrated this kind of notions into it, because, okay, if you're going to become a scientist, you have to know the implications of your science. This atomic technology, physics, it can be used for good, it can be used for clean energy, but it can also be used for creating bombs. And AI is just like that. It's a powerful technology. It can be used for helping a lot of people, but it can also be used for a complete surveillance society where a small group of people are repressing a large group of people. So you have to be careful in designing technology. You have to understand the implications of this technology.
Great. Yeah, indeed, it's a very important aspect, given that AI is a multidisciplinary subject, and obviously it's very important to understand the ethical implication of the technology we are developing. So with that, we really thank you for this session, and I'm pretty sure the answers or the insights to the projects that you have provided will really inspire the audience who will be looking out for this particular interview. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.